Good evening. I'm pleased to call the Joint Town Council Planning Commission study session to order. Could we have a call of the roll, please?
Thank you. Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinsky.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Steve Rice.
Here.
Commissioner Bourgeois.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Talisfor.
Here.
Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
Vice Chair Jensen.
Here.
Chair Sayoc.
Here.
Would you all please stand and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No. Only if it's Gabby Giffords who does it. So first, I'd like to ask anybody that has a cell phone in the ring mode, if you would turn that to silent or off, please. I'd appreciate it. And then if you wish to speak this evening, in the front of you on the backs of the pews there are speaker cards, and you can fill one of those out and turn them in to the clerk on my left, your right. And we'll have the verbal communications before we get going, and then also public comment on tonight's agenda item at the end of the council and commission discussion. So first of all, for any verbal communications on an item not on tonight's agenda, you may not have had time to fill out cards, but if you want to fill that out afterwards, you can do so. Anybody want to come to the mic on a non-agenda item? Seeing none. So the purpose of tonight's study session is to discuss the North 40, which what's commonly known as the North 40, an area bounded roughly by Highway 85, Los Gatos Boulevard, Lark Avenue, and Highway 17. The Town Council and the Planning Commission will review the progress of the North 40 Advisory Committee and that they have made since the last joint Town Council and Planning Commission meeting in May, and to provide input to refine the conceptual site design and provide sufficient detail to begin drafting the specific plan standards and guidelines, which will be reviewed by the Advisory Committee, the community, and ultimately the Planning Commission and Town Council. I encourage my colleagues on the Council and Planning Commission to take this opportunity to provide input and add input to already provided by the Advisory Committee and community. There will be an opportunity for public comment following our discussion. We have much material to be presented and discussed, and we have a special town council meeting that will follow this study session. So I'm setting aside 30 minutes at the end of the study session for public comment. We'll try to adhere to the time frame set for each segment of the presentation to ensure that we get through the entire discussion. To open us up, I'm going to ask Wendy Rooney, Community Development Director, to come to the mic.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Rice, Town Council members, Chair Sayoc, Planning Commission members, staff, and community members. Tonight, your staff and your consultants are very excited to present to you the progress on the North 40 specific plan. As the mayor indicated, the update will cover topics that and input that we've received since the joint study session between the Planning Commission and Town Council in May. We do have a full agenda tonight and have allocated time in between each topic to facilitate Council and Planning Commission's questions and answers and dialogue. We will begin with setting the stage and discussing the evolutionary process, and as you will see, it is an evolutionary process that has occurred with the development of the specific plan, vision, and concept. Next, we'll ask you to confirm the vision that has been discussed and dissected over the past 4 advisory committee meetings. We plan to discuss and receive input on the specific plan land uses, and finally, on building heights for the various plan land uses. We will have a brief discussion of the next steps and conclude with public comments, as the mayor mentioned. Regarding public comments, we have received one written comment that was distributed to the Planning Commission and the Town Council in their agenda packet. And you also have a desk item before you tonight, and it's basically a very brief response to the issues that were raised in the communication. I'll quickly summarize those. The commenter discussed and asked whether some other alternatives have been looked at in the North 40, and specifically the commenter mentioned a continuum care facility, a large-scale one similar to a Hyatt Classic, education of higher learning, some type of a think tank is what I would interpret that to be, and then also possibly some type of an urban park or a suburban park. The key response to these concepts is that these types of uses individually would be inconsistent with not only the 2020 general plan that was recently adopted, the goals and objectives that were identified in the plan, but also with the former 1999 North 40 draft-specific plan that this plan is largely based upon, with some exceptions, as the Council and Planning Commission are aware of, including residential incorporation into the plan. As I was contemplating tonight's presentation, I realized it was just about a year ago that I stood before you, or actually sat over there, and brought to you the contract to execute with RRM Design Group, our specific plan consultants. It was the first meeting in February, so we're at about a year mark. We've had a lot of activity this past year, and I'd just like to quickly summarize that. In March 2011, the town kicked off the specific plan update process with a brainstorming session with the Planning Commission, the Town Council, and the North 40 Advisory Committee. Using the general plan as a starting point, the committee, or the work study session members were able to brainstorm on the types of uses that they felt would be appropriate for the North 40 specific plan area and types of uses that would be inappropriate for those areas. A week later, we repeated the same exercise with the community in early April, and then we followed that with our first North 40 Advisory Committee meeting. During this time, the town was also preparing a market analysis for the North 40, as well as other major commercial neighborhoods in the community. And as you'll hear from our Economic Vitality Manager, Jessica Von Bork, the analysis was used to shape the proposed mix of land uses for the North 40 specific plan. As I said, this has been an evolutionary process. In May 2011, the town held a second community workshop. In that same month, we also had a joint Town Council and Planning Commission study session and another advisory committee meeting, in which another advisory committee meeting, excuse me. Throughout the summer, we actually held 3 advisory committee meetings, no summer break for our advisory committee. At one of them, they had I think, the interesting and fun process of developing their own site plans. They actually were able to get into groups of 2 and 3 and develop based upon all the information they've had, all the input from the public, the input from our kickoff meeting, and come up with their own plans, and we'll be sharing that with you tonight. The committee also held extensive conversations regarding the plan's vision, concept, land uses, and building heights. And that's really occurred over the last, say, 4 meetings. Since the summer, we've held one more advisory committee meeting in November where that discussion and input has been achieved on these topics. All told, we've had 6 advisory meetings, we've had 2 community meetings, and including this session, 3 joint study sessions. Although the work and analysis completed this past year was quite substantial, as the Council and Planning Commission are aware, there's been considerable work done on the North 40 plan prior to even a year ago when we initiated this. And that's contained in the 2020 general plan, including the Vosona Light Rail element, the 1990 draft North 40 specific plan, as well as the Los Gatos Boulevard plan. So many of the concepts and principles and goals are gleaned from those plans. Now, I'd like to move to the flow chart that's on your display right now. And the large red arrow that's down in the bottom left-hand corner shows you where we are today. So we actually are making progress. That's a good thing. We are roughly at the midpoint of the process. The blue circles on the bottom row show the remaining Town Council, Planning Commission, and Advisory Committee meetings that we've scheduled. We recognize there may be the need to add more, but at this point, that's what we've scheduled. And then the red diamond represents community meetings. And of course, in every planning commission, town council, and advisory committee, the public's welcome. So in reality, the community should be integrated into all those boxes. So we have roughly 6 to 9 months more of process ahead of us leading to the adoption of the town's specific plan. And again, I just want to, I know I don't have to reiterate this for the Council and Planning Commission, but for the audience, we are developing a specific plan document, not a development application. So this could lead someday to a development application, but at this point it is a document, a policy document. So with those opening remarks, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Debbie Rudd and Jamie Williams with our RM Design Group. And Debbie's going to be, for the most part, guiding us through tonight's presentation. All the staff is situated at the front area here so we can facilitate questions. We have timed roughly 10 to 15 minutes of discussion in between each topic, so we're really going to have to stay on point so we can try to get through all these topics. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and Planning Commission. First, we'd like to just start with setting the stage and covering for the community as well as anyone who doesn't remember some of the things, the general plan, also touching on the school issue, and then having Jessica will go over some of the economic marketing report. So first of all, as you know, there are 14 guiding principles that the specific plan will be following that the general plan sets out. And in the general plan and the EIR, they analyzed impacts for 750 mixed residential units and 580,000 square feet of commercial. So that's the maximum that the general plan analyzed. It doesn't mean that in the specific plan we have to maximize that out. It's just setting a cap that we know that we want to work within those ranges that you had decided for in the general plan. The general plan also specifies that a specific plan is necessary and needs to be, the existing specific plan needs to be updated. There are a number of goals and policies in the general plan. The first one talks about a variety of uses for development on the North 40 and coordinating these uses in a comprehensive way. So that's the beauty of a specific plan, is we really can take a comprehensive look at these uses. The other one is creating a mixed-use development, and it outlines the type of uses that are expected on the North 40, including housing, and I guess in the policies, they really specify it even further. There's 10 additional policies. And they talk about housing, office, hotel, commercial, visitor serving, and entertainment. So these are all uses that we are using as a ground plane. And as we've gone through the process and worked with the AC, we're coming up with the same things and finding that the AC and the community are agreeing with the way the general plan has set the stage for this. So I'm not a school expert, but I did want to just touch on, we know that schools and the impacts to schools is a big issue to the community and to the Council and Planning Commission. And I wanted to just reiterate that in 2010, the town collaborated with the school districts, and they looked at the student generation rates, not only within Los Gatos and looking at examples within Los Gatos, but because there's not as many affordable housing and condos and apartment buildings to study, they also looked at communities outside of Los Gatos that had similar demographics and kind of compared. And the purpose of this was really to get a good idea of how many students will each residential use generate. So we have an understanding, if we have a specific plan that allows a certain number of units, what will that equal in students? The study broke it out in kindergarten through 5th grade, 6th through 8th, 9th through 12th. It looked at affordable apartments, attached condominium and apartments, and it looked at mixed use. And then these numbers were then translated into the number of students each one of these types of residential unit would generate. So you can see here, it's about 28 students would be generated by affordable apartments. Now these numbers are from your general plan, not from the current specific plan, but it gives you an idea. A total of 95, together with the mixed use, would be roughly 100 students would be generated if we use the general plan guidelines with those type of, that number of units that the general plan had allotted. So we just included this slide to remind everyone that the SB 50 does impose new limitations on the power of cities and counties to require and what they can require as mitigation measures for schools. So schools are now going out and finding different funds to build their new facilities. With that, Wendy, do you want to add anything else? Okay. So what I'd like to do now is let Jessica speak, and then after that, open it up for questions.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and Planning Commission members. It's my pleasure to present the market study findings to you this evening. It's important to keep in mind that the study and its findings have been a tool used by the advisory committee to create the framework for commercial land uses within the specific plan of the North 40, as previously mentioned by Wendy. Work began on the market study in the spring of 2011 and was completed in August of 2011 by the town's marketing consultants, Bay Area Economics. The study focused on completing a comprehensive analysis of the town's commercial and industrial districts, which included 4 neighborhood commercial centers, Los Gatos Boulevard, and the downtown. In addition, the study identified products and services Los Gatos residents purchase or pursue out of town, otherwise known as leakage or demand. Based on the data compiled by BAE, they identified strategic efforts and recommend to maintain the town's economic vitality and identified mechanisms that may assist the downtown merchants to flourish in light of potential new commercial development at the North 40. In this presentation, I will highlight significant market study findings, commercial opportunities and demands as identified by the leakage analysis, and go over notable recommendations. The market study identified a retail trade area that extended beyond the Los Gatos boundaries in order to capture a more robust and accurate data that was affiliated with complete and whole zip code areas. Therefore, in addition to Los Gatos, the consultants used a retail trade area that included parts of Saratoga, Montecito, Campbell, and San Jose. The defined trade area is much more dynamic and realistic reflection of where shoppers and employees were coming from into Los Gatos and vice versa. The defined trade area brings approximately 100,000 employees into the area daily. More notably, Good Samaritan, which is about 2-minute drive time from the North 40, employs about 1,800 people, and in addition to that, generates on average 88,000 annual patient days. With those patients, obviously become visitors into the community as well. Similarly, Mission Oaks, which is a 3-minute drive time from the North 40, has approximately 2,000 employees. These are significant findings primarily because they indicate an opportunity at the North 40 to provide food and beverage, shopping opportunities, as well as basic services that could meet the needs of the employees and visitors to both of those facilities. According to hospital officials, because Good Samaritan and Mission Oaks are on the border of the community, employees and visitors tend to travel into Campbell and San Jose to have those needs met, as opposed to traveling further into Los Gatos to have them met. Therefore, this is an opportunity for the North 40 to provide those sorts of services for those employment centers. In addition, hospital officials commented that they tend to have a myriad of doctor conferences and trainings where they need to utilize conference facilities as well as high-end hotel services. Right now, again, that is something they're contracting outside of the town because the town cannot meet those needs. So another opportunity for the North 40 site to provide those sorts of services. From an office perspective, the town is currently at a 2.6%. It has approximately 2.6% of its land zoned for industrial and office uses. This is well below the average for similar-sized communities and other communities in the West Valley area, which tend to range in between 5 and 7%. With the town at an 8.8% vacancy rate for office, which is well below the region, and an absorbency rate for office and R&D at about 85% when the study was done. The study identified that the West Valley community can absorb an additional 700 to 900,000 square feet of Class A office space. And that would be appropriate for the North 40 to absorb approximately 10 to 20% of that, which would create a range of 70 to 180,000 square feet of office. Additionally, the market study highlights that due to the demographics of the area, with many executive level high-tech employees, and serial entrepreneurs in this community, that including innovative office space at the North 40 would provide additional opportunities to retain and attract the town's very own thriving startup community. The market study identified the following goods and services as gaps, or opportunities rather, to provide services and goods that the Los Gatos residents seek elsewhere, meaning they leave Los Gatos to obtain them. They were predominantly general merchandise items, such as those found at Target or department stores such as JCPenney or Nordstrom Rack, appliance stores, home improvement centers as well. The study also found that residents were leaving Los Gatos to purchase specialty food items such as meat, cheeses, seafood, and produce. In addition, the study identified formula retail at a 10,000 square foot or greater tenant space was something that was leaking from the community as well. Formula retailers have a strong desire to locate in Los Gatos, particularly the downtown, but they're generally limited by regulations that we have in our land use codes that limit where they can and can't go through CUP mechanisms, but we also have limited amount of tenant spaces that could service those formula retailers that need space 10,000 square feet or greater. So they naturally tend to look outside of our community. The North 40 is another opportunity that the economic consultant identified as a way to capture that missing product need potentially. In addition, what makes the North 40 an attractive office location is that the businesses are trending towards locating in mixed-use developments as they're using these as employee attraction and retention tools. The new generation of the workforce is really looking for employers that are located along major corridors, transportation corridors, as well as or located in close proximity to mass transit connections. Plus, located in mixed-use environment enables employees to walk to basic services, including food and beverage, entertainment, and shopping. And in addition to that, if you add hotel and conferencing services and facilities, it tends to complement those office uses and create some strong synergies. And the North 40 could be a potential opportunity to capture those. In order to address concerns about what additional commercial development may do to the vibrancy of downtown merchants in the downtown, the market study consultants identified tools that may be incorporated into the specific plan to enable the downtown to continue to flourish in light of potential new commercial development at the North 40. By identifying the downtown's strengths, the goal of the strategies is to provide and create ways to build on those strengths. The study suggests that the specific plan should allow the North 40 to attract uses that fill gaps, or provide for opportunities, rather, that are identified in the leakage analysis. This could be done by encouraging formula retail and larger format retail at the North 40, while at the same time discouraging smaller floor plates, or tenant spaces, rather, that could potentially attract competing independent retailers. In addition, the economic consultants suggest discouraging a mix of uses similar to that of downtown that could potentially mimic the downtown. Rather, the consultant encourages providing opportunities for the uses that could potentially meet unmet needs in the community as identified in the leakage study. These control mechanisms will be discussed in the land use portion of the presentation later on. Another strategy to enhance the downtown is to initiate a coordinated marketing campaign with the North 40. When the economics consultants were studying this and in the way they approached it, they were really surprised by the fact that Los Gatos actually has a lot of destination-related amenities. Los Gatos Creek Trail, Vasona County Park, the downtown itself, as well as the wineries in Santa Cruz and Los Gatos proper, all of which have a strong regional following, yet they have never been marketed as a whole. The North 40 can provide that opportunity through the creation of a coordinated marketing campaign that links them all, furthering emphasizing the destination charm and desirability Los Gatos has to capture visitors and repeat customers. As the North 40 is a gateway location to the community, there's even a greater opportunity through community-wide wayfinding signage to link all of these destination-related amenities. Another strategy would be to continue to reinforce the downtown's role as a community hub and social center through activities such as Jazz in the Plaza and Music in the Park, the parade, and the holiday tree lighting. As a result, the proposed public spaces within the North 40 project could be proposed in such a way as to not compete with those efforts through focusing more on neighborhood gathering spaces as opposed to community-wide gathering spaces like the downtown. Parking downtown is currently a good problem in some people's eyes, but it still continues to be a challenge. And additional signage and wayfinding could improve that experience for visitors, and it could be done in the same community-wide signage efforts mirroring all the coordinated marketing themes. In general, the market study identified strategic recommendations aimed at physically connecting the downtown with the North 40 as well. The first recommendation is to create and provide a free shuttle service program or a shared bike program. This will provide opportunities for visitors to visit either destination, go back and forth, or visit other destination-oriented amenities in our community. Secondly, the consultants recommended incorporating marketing opportunities for independent downtown merchants at the North 40 through the provision of kiosks in public paseos or public green areas, even perhaps creating a transit center hub where the shuttle and the bike share program can orient themselves. These kiosks could provide a short-term rotational marketing opportunity where downtown independent retailers could showcase samples of their products and encourage North 40 visitors to explore downtown. Because of the proposed provision of the residential and the desire to create residential districts upholding the general plan goals of creating a full-service community, the market study consultants recommended encouraging an element of neighborhood retail serving commercial. Not only would it support residents of the project, but the employment centers within and adjacent to the project as well. In addition, by providing neighborhood serving commercial uses, the consultants highlighted how these efforts would reflect smart growth initiatives supported by the county and the state. In order to create a viable hotel that not only meets lodging needs identified in the leakage study, the consultant recommended incorporating conference facilities within the hotel use, as we discussed earlier. And these facilities could provide needed meeting space not only for Los Gatos businesses, but for our thriving community service clubs as well. And finally, tagging onto the finding supporting the provision of additional Class A office space in the North 40, the consultants recommended creating opportunities on the site for flexible office space, which highlights and supports Los Gatos' thriving startup environment while providing opportunities for future growth for our existing businesses. In the conclusion, the market study has been a tool used to guide the commercial land uses proposed for the specific plan, and a guide for the creation of a framework of control mechanisms that will promote complementary uses and strengthen downtown attributes, as well as provide opportunities to meet identified services and product needs that have not yet been met. So that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Debbie is also available to answer questions pertaining to her portion of the presentation. Unfortunately, the consultant was unable to be with us today, so staff will be responding to all of your questions as best we can.
Thank you. I'll open it up to questions from the commission members or the council. Chair Sayoc.
I just need clarification on the sales tax leakage slide that you had. It listed Class A office and then 70,000 to 90,000. Is that what is identified that is needed in town?
That's a great question. Thanks. I can clarify. So basically, the retail trade area that the consultant looked at, when they identified what was leaking or the potential of the capacity for additional office space in that retail trade area, it's 700 to 900,000 square feet. The 10 to 20% is what the consultant felt would be an accurate amount for the North 40 site based on how much square footage we currently have and what our vacancy rate is.
I wanted to ask you a question about the school memo. One of the things the memo says, it notes the effect of state law limiting what businesses have to pay unrelated to the students that are generated. But the memo suggests that school districts have a variety of funding mechanisms. Did you check with the school to see if they're tapped out as far as bonding and other things are concerned?
No, we have not.
Because I understood that the superintendent who appeared before us before said that.
I had too heard that for the middle school, elementary and middle school. I'm not sure about the high school district, but I too have heard the same comment.
Do you think, therefore, it probably ought to be mentioned in the memo we're dealing with?
This was actually just a white paper that was given to the advisory committee 6 months ago that just gave them an overview. It wasn't intended to be specific to our district. I think that as the specific plan process continues along with the environmental analysis that will be conducted, I think that the more granular issues will then be addressed and fleshed out.
Okay, the reason I ask is that the import of the memo, I think, is summed up in the next to the last paragraph when it tells us we have to be careful about our ability to address funding of school facilities. But I think we should at least be accurate as to what the schools can do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Talasfor?
As a follow-up to that, and it's another education questions. It says on your attachment 5 in the same report, actual counts from nearby districts and districts with similar academic standing confirm fewer students on average per dwelling. So you don't name the districts. Which districts did you use?
Predominantly Irvine School District in Southern California.
Okay.
And the reason we did that is because the North 40 plan, remember this was done 2 years ago when we were doing, producing the environmental impact report for the general plan. And at that time, the types of residential products that we were envisioning in the North 40 were not generally represented in the community and not represented in a lot of communities in the nearby area that had similar AP scores for school districts. And so the consultant that was hired to do this analysis had worked extensively with Irvine, knew that they had a variety of housing products, residential products, and also was aware of their high-performing schools and felt that would be a good comparison to use. Let me add to that, as we move forward, however, with the general plan, with the North 40 specific plan environmental impact report, and based on discussions with the superintendent for the middle elementary school, we will be surveying some local districts. Now that we're narrowing down on the type of housing products, we'll be able to come up with probably something, I suspect, Palo Alto, Cupertino area, where we'll be able to do a little bit better local survey. However, I think Irvine was a good representation because it had similar housing product types. But that being said, a good half of the data was generated from our own community. We actually overlaid the enrollment the actual enrollment from the schools on our various housing products, and we're able to actually come up with the students per household within our district. We just couldn't do it for all the product types because we didn't have all the product types.
So you'll be returning to our school district again, I would
Yes,
think,
with
and
the,
work
with the,
superintendent.
sorry, I keep saying general plan. With the North 40 specific plan, we'll be doing the same type of analysis, so we'll be updating it. Basically, the figures will be now, those figures were done 2 years ago, so there'll be updated figures. We'll recalculate the current enrollment for Los Gatos, and then we'll use similar nearby school districts for the comparisons for the product types we don't have.
And one thing else, I think it's interesting that that these counts are here and that we're considering it. But the other thing we have to consider is that it's not just the child and what it costs a year to support that child. But it's also the facility. So it's the facilities plus what it costs the school district to educate that child that really we have to pay attention to. And that really what this reflects, though we couldn't certainly, say that, ask the developer to finance any of our schools, but on the other hand, it does affect our quality of life. And so I really think we need to really pay attention to that.
And I suspect that as we move forward with the EIR, we'll be identifying opportunities. The EIR itself tends to stay on the technical analysis portion, but I think other opportunities will be identified throughout this process as we move forward.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
I have a recollection which may be inaccurate, so I wanted to see, did the elementary school district agree with these numbers?
They agreed with the methodology.
But not the numbers?
Well, they agreed with the methodology, so the numbers are what they are. If you apply that methodology, they are. I mean, they agreed that this was an appropriate way to calculate the students per household.
I'm just trying to recall. It seems to
think-
me we had testimony before from the district that said they did not agree with the numbers, notwithstanding their agreement with the methodology. Maybe my memory's wrong.
I think, well, from the high school district, I don't think that we heard that. I think the high school district was in complete agreement, as a matter of fact. And they may not have testified to that at the Planning Commission, but at the council that they did.
I'm focusing on the elementary
On the
school.
elementary and high school district, I think they felt that the numbers were accurate. I think they felt the impacts, though, were larger than what seemed. And the EIR doesn't make any analysis of what those impacts are. The EIR was responsible for identifying what the student generation was, and as we know, SB 50 basically limits how much the town can then mitigate for school impacts. And so the finding was that it was mitigated through SB 50. So that's the extent the general plan EIR analyzed.
Just a final follow-up. Notwithstanding the legislature's decision, I think it was 1998, so it's not particularly new, I don't believe, but I don't know that that's been raised either. I don't recall since 1998 the per square foot mitigation for schools, notwithstanding, it's 1998.
I believe there was some type of cost of
Let me
living.
finish. Notwithstanding that we have to be sensitive to what we can do and what we can't do, I assume here we have some choices made as to what kind of residential, which may have a serendipitous effect on the number of students generated. So I guess we ought to be considering, while not getting in the way of SB 50, we can consider, I suppose, the various choices that are available to us.
Absolutely, and I think that's, again, what the EIR process will allow you to do is look at the generation rates per types of units. So that gives you some more more data to be able to then say, maybe we want to, ironically, single family, which people would think would, I think intuitively we would feel single family would be least impacting, but it actually is the greatest impact. You tend to have higher student generation rates from single family, less units generally, because it consumes more land. However, we'll be able then to refine what types of products we want if we want to use that data exclusively or as a companion to other data. Yes.
Okay. Vice Mayor Spector?
Thank you. Actually, my first question goes right up with that. In making your presentation, I think it was yours, did you do a student generation rate for single-family detached dwellings?
No, we didn't. Both the school districts had contracted with a different contractor, Davis Demographics, to produce the single-family rate, and both school districts as well as the town were all in agreement with that projection.
All right, because in our committee discussions, the issue of single-family detached dwellings is still in play.
Correct.
All right. Then the one more question, and I don't know who it's for. Whoever was talking about leakage, the economic study that was done did show some leakage, i.e. building supplies, a general merchandise store. But I think in order to complete the picture, it showed a tremendous, what I call reverse leakage, where Los Gatos gets a very significant disproportionate amount of sales in many categories. And if you could just tell us that so we're all on the same page there.
That is correct. So just to throw out some general numbers that the consultants provided in terms of the attraction that Los Gatos has. So the attraction includes Los Gatos residents shopping as well as those regional shoppers coming in. We capture a lot of sales tax from the 4 neighborhood commercial centers that we have. They all have, actually I think they all have Safeways in them, and they're on the border, so they do pull in from neighboring communities. We capture about 320 million in sales tax. Of course, we get a portion of that, but that's what we bring in as opposed to 80 million, which we leak.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank Commissioner Smith, and then Chair Sayoc.
Actually, I think, Jessica, if I could just ask you a follow-up question. When the consultant made a recommendation for the office space percentage, was Albright Way taken into consideration?
Yes, it was. When this report started in the spring, we knew that project was online, so they included the 500 plus square feet 500,000 square feet that that project would potentially bring online. So that was included in that estimate. So the 700 to 900,000 square feet for the West Valley area, the opportunity to absorb that and capture that, also included the 500,000 when we were looking at it. So it's in addition to the 500,000, in other words.
And how much for this project, though? I know the 700 to 900,000, you gave a percentage, was it 10%?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So set a 10 to 20% for the North 40 specifically, which would bring anywhere from 70 to approximately 180,000 square feet.
So together, the projects would be 680,000 square feet of office space we could absorb.
Correct.
Thank you.
Chair Sayoc.
Actually, Jessica, there's two more questions for you. Going back to that 10 to 20% specific for Class A, what's the rationale for 10 to 20 versus 30 to 40, 50 to 60?
Right. So in the study, what the consultants look at is they look at absorption rates for the area, and this is the West Valley area as well as the retail trade area that they were studying. So they're looking at absorption rates. They're also looking at vacancy rates, and then they use employment data from ABAG to estimate what the employment trends or what direction they're going and how many new employees projected jobs will encourage to the area. So they take all of that data, and from that, they basically make an estimate for development square footage sizes and acreage. So based on a 40-acre project site in this area and the absorption rates and the capacity to absorb through the vacancy rates that we have and the jobs projected for the area, they ended up at about a 10 to 20% range.
Okay, and then the second one, with regards to the 100,000 employees that's at Good Sam, Mission Oaks, did the study talk about the reasons why an employee would move towards Campbell, San Jose in their shopping, restaurant eating versus coming into Los Gatos? One of the things that I find, and again, it's anecdotal, is that traffic is a big concern. And so given that that's a concern that is there, how would that be incorporated into an economic and/or EIR study to look at how traffic would, in fact, create a problem against one of our main goals for this project?
So I'll try to answer I think you had three components there. So there are 100,000 employees that come into the retail trade area, but Good Sam and Mission Oaks combined bring in 3,800 employees, just to clarify that. What I heard from the hospital officials and what is reported by the economists in the report is that the hospital did a survey of their employees, and they tend to travel to those locations that are easiest to get to. So it takes longer to drive down Los Gatos Boulevard to hit downtown or any of the spots on Los Gatos Boulevard outside of the subway that's across the street. It's easier for them to hop on 85 and head down to parts of San Jose, or hop on 17 and head into the Pruneyard area of Campbell. So it's a time-related issue. In terms of traffic, and maybe you need to repeat that portion of your question for me, I'm sorry.
Like, are there studies that show how much minute in delays in terms of minutes would one person go one route versus another? I don't even know if such a study exists, but
I'm not familiar with that being something that would be studied in an EIR. I don't know. I turned to Wendy or anyone else about, sorry.
Just curiosity. And I do have one more question, but it's not related to the market study.
Okay.
If that's okay. Okay. It's regarding to schools. A lot of discussion about the work and the collaboration you've done with the Los Gatos School District, but there's also a significant portion that could possibly go to Cambrian and Campbell. And has any discussion happened with those school districts in terms of the generation methodology that has been used and absorption rates, whether they can absorb it, whether they can't? What are their thoughts on the process?
We actually did. We met with all the school districts that are that the town serves, or serves the town, I should say. And when the general plan EIR was under draft, and what's envisioned for the most part, we believe, on the north side of the specific plan would be mixed use residential uses, and retail. very, very low generation rates. So I think actually those school districts would see this more as a windfall because they would be getting the property tax for it, but with very little generation of students. So all the districts that we met with all the districts, I think all the districts participated in the study that we prepared to develop the generation rates, and I haven't had dialogue with them since that was completed, but I believe that they were all comfortable again with the methodology.
Commissioner Talasfor?
Follow-up to that. So how many, can we review again? Because I was under the impression that all the housing was going to be at one side, on the south side. Now so it is divided between
And we'll get to
two-
that. We'll expand on that a little bit more as we move into the presentation, but yes, we'll get to that.
Oh, you're not finished with the presentation
Oh, no,
tonight?
we've got,
Okay.
it's segments.
Oh,
We
I
have-
see. We're taking it in segments, sorry. Well, then in that case, I do have another question. Do you mind?
Go ahead.
The question is, Jessica spoke about flexible Class A office space. Can you comment on what you mean by flexible? And then there was also something about an innovation center.
Yes.
Can you
So-
talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So now, currently, the trends are looking at renaming what we used to know as an incubator space, which is basically a space that startups could go to and not have to pay for a large space to lease, but rather just a small office, but also take advantage of amenities that, as a startup, they might not otherwise be able to afford, such as marketing, accounting, legal services, financial services. So those incubators tend to provide all of those services in one hub. As time's moved on, the name of that has changed. They're now called innovation centers, but the idea is essentially the same. Having flexible office space is something that we've heard time and time again from businesses as we visited them, because they tend to expand and contract quite quickly depending on how much funding they're getting. We're not seeing a lot of expansion lately. There are a few businesses that do, but having that space that enables an office building as a whole to be able to expand and contract the size of its office spaces is really essential and important to success of businesses these days.
Okay. And is there any thought, do I can have one more question about retail real quick?
Sure.
Has any thought been given to the fact that how we're transitioning in retail from just storefronts to incorporating the, online services, et cetera, et cetera? Has any of that thought gone into this plan?
No, that was not addressed in the market study. However, the advisory committee was really hip to that question and asked several times. Our consultant, and I'm paraphrasing his response to that from months ago, was that actually what they have found is people will surf the web and they'll look on the internet for opportunities, but they still like to go to the place where they could hold something and touch it and make a purchase. So yes, it does impact the brick and mortar in the sense that a lot of people order online, but he felt that he's also seeing that retract a little bit, and people are tending to use the internet now as a surfing mechanism to see where they can get the best deal, but then they're actually going into the storefront to purchase.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is for Ms. Rooney and/or the consultants. I'm not sure which. And it's more of a general question that relates to the process and kind of where we are at this point in time. What I'm confused about, or what I'm concerned that I feel like we're missing, is a real vision statement. And I know the next section of discussion is called vision, but it's actually gets very much into specifics of design and land use and so on. So it seems to me that we should be at some point creating a narrative that describes the vision for the North 40 that reflects the town's values and priorities. So in the general plan, and I remember this very well, the discussion, very well. It's very skimpy bullet points that just lay out some points that we wanted to have emphasized in the general plan. We have comments that were gathered by council and planning commission and the community at the kickoff meeting, but that never was turned again into a narrative. We have opportunities that are being presented to us in the market study and elsewhere, but we don't know which. It doesn't mean we have to take advantage of all those opportunities. And what I feel like we're lacking is that vision statement narrative that we compare and contrast to the opportunities to see which ones are appropriate for us. So when does that happen?
I think that's an excellent comment and an excellent question. I probably will refer to Debbie since RRM drafts the specific plan and they know where that would be addressed. But I would say that's part of the specific plan process, that once we identify ranges of what we want to see in there, from there we can then draft a vision statement. But let me turn it over to Debbie.
But let me, and before you even answer that, let me just argue the point a little bit, because then you can do rebuttal, so you can come on up. It's okay. If you have a goal and you really know where you want to end up, then there are lots of ways to get there. It seems like it's going backwards, and we're saying, okay, we want to use this street, we want to use this street, we want to use this street, office, retail, residential, and hope that it ends up there. So it's a backward process by the way that I consider we do strategic planning. So explain to me or rebut me.
So I would say that what we're using as the preliminary vision are the principles that the general plan set out, and making it a walkable community, really creating that new neighborhood. But I think you're right. We've never presented a true vision statement. What we will have in the specific plan is a vision chapter, and in the vision chapter, that's where you'll have the narrative. But I think you bring up a good point. Maybe that should be something that comes to the AC prior to the whole document coming to the AC. I think one of the reasons we're struggling with creating a vision statement at this point is we're getting lots of different feedback, and that's why we went back and kind of started anew with the visioning that we've been doing and on the site planning.
I don't know how much more, Mayor, you want me to go on and say about this, but I really, using a walkable neighborhood is a feature, but it's not really a vision. And where I keep seeing a disparity is the idea between a continuation of what currently exists in Los Gatos, flowing over Lark and continuing to flow through that orchard, what's now Orchard, and up to 85, versus creating a distinct district that would not compete. And to me, those are two very different visions. And I think where we're starting to see the discomfort and dissension is because we haven't addressed that basic vision issue to begin with. So
And
I think we need to do that
bring up
sooner
a really
rather than
good
later.
point, and we've kind of dropped it. I mean, there was a point where we had a PowerPoint presentation where we really talked about more of the values and the type. It was, I think we called it the live. What was it? The values. And it was really more vision type of a PowerPoint, and we presented that back maybe like in May or something, and then we kind of lost and started getting into more of what the land uses are, what the heights are going to be. And I think you're right. We need to pull it back. We need to set that vision and use that as a guiding light as we go forward. I think that would be helpful.
And this will be my final statement, if it's all right. Well, for now. Because ultimately, I think what will happen if we don't do that is it'll go through the process, it'll get to the point of looking at the specific plan, or even worse, at the point where we approve a specific plan and then a development application comes in, and everyone throws up their hands and say, oh no, this isn't at all what we wanted to do. And so therefore, we've wasted a whole lot of time. It's unfair to the community, it's unfair to the developer to not deal with the basic issues up front. So that's where I think we should go.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of material to put together that vision when you look at the 14 principles, and then you look at the vision material we put together already. I think we're almost there, but I think we do need to pull it together, put it together in a nice, clean package to keep using as our guiding vision.
Almost becomes a template
Yeah.
that you put down then on any idea. Innovation Center, does it fit that template? Does it fit that vision? formula retail, does it fit that vision, that template? You know, I think there needs to be a lot more work done in that area.
Okay, I'm going to go to Commissioner Erickson, and then we're going to move on.
So my concern, Councilwoman McNutt just expressed very well. And to make her point further, let me read something from the general plan, which is in Land Use 1, page 1. It says, quote, "Downtown Los Gatos is the historic heart of the town with a pedestrian scale setting of mixed land uses and architecturally historic buildings. It is a unique area that sets the spirit and style of the entire town." Seems like to me that's a beautiful, succinct vision statement for the downtown area that is very much exactly what Councilwoman McNutt was talking about, I believe. And so we have successfully, as a town, put in place ordinances and planning guidelines that are inspired by, defined by that kind of a vision. And I can't very intelligently or effectively comment on the more specific material without understanding how this particular area will be integrated with, complement, but be distinctive from other areas in town. So it seems to me very much so the cart is before the horse. And it's in my experience in doing other kinds of planning in my job and other kinds of settings, the detail becomes easy if I deal with the hard work of the clear vision first. So it seems we've jumped to the easy part, which is always more comfortable and easier for us to do than the really hard work of being clear about what our values are and what the vision is, which is very hard to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. We're going to move on to the next step, which happens to be confirming the vision. And I have some comments on that, but some of them have already been made, but I'm going to hold mine until we get to the end. I'm going to suggest this to staff, as I'm very concerned about time. And as you can see, the council and the commission are very well prepared and have a lot of discussion. And to compress as much as possible staff's presentations to allow for the maximum amount of discussion so that maybe we can get to the vision that we're talking about here.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, you had forewarned staff that you expected the Planning Commission and Council to be prepared and have a lot of questions, so we did just look at the next three sections. We think we can consolidate the staff presentation, instead of it taking an hour and 10 minutes down into 15 to 20 minutes range for all of that, and then go to council discussion for the real heart of the material, which gets us the vision and how that gets applied.
So you want to do the three together and then the general discussion?
That would be staff's recommendation, and we can shrink the staff presentation to cover all three.
Does anybody from council or commission have an issue with that? Seeing none, let's go for that plan.
Okay. So design evolution. We were in front of you in May, and part of that presentation included a conceptual vision plan. And it was in front of the Town Council and Planning Commission. We also took that conceptual vision plan in front of the community and then also in front of the AC. We got feedback, and what we were hearing was it needed a lot more work, that it was a little bit too dense, it felt too urban, it felt too much like Santana Row with the density possibly. And so what we did was take a step back and really go back to the drawing boards. And we went in August back to the AC and did a design charrette, kind of a brainstorming with the AC. And it was an exercise where we gave, the land uses were cut out in puzzle pieces, and they were color-coded. And then each table at the AC, where they're divided up into groups, would brainstorm and put these together to create a site plan, really kind of analyze what type of land uses and how they would organize them on the site. We had the light yellow was residential, the blue was office, the purple represented hotel, and the red represented more commercial entertainment type uses. After that, the team went back to the drawing boards and tried to translate all the different input that were received from the AC and find out what are the common themes that keep being repeated. And that included creating a walkable development. It's really important to both the community and the AC that whatever happens, it's a neighborhood that's walkable and has a variety of walkable paseos and spaces. Establishing focal points, and that really came out of the charrette exercise where we really wanted to make sure that the streets terminated into focal points and not into a parking lot or a parking garage, but a building or something special. Give prominence to Market Hall. And Market Hall was a use that was presented on the earlier vision concept plan, where it's kind of like a ferry building or Pike's Market or it's really a specialty foods, but more in a market like a butcher. You'd have your butcher and your baker and your flower shop all under one roof, but then kind of turned inside out. So you would have it opened up to the sidewalk and spilling out onto the sidewalk. Something that was well received. And so we're incorporating that as well. And they wanted that to be in a highly visible spot. Incorporating tree and orchard landscaping along Los Gatos Boulevard. Incorporating a variety of retail types, small format, medium format, and large format, not going to the very large format like a big box. Incorporating an innovative office center. What happened was at that August meeting, before they did the charrette, the economic consultants came and gave their presentation on leakage. And in that presentation, one of the things that kind of seemed to emerge is that there was an opportunity to provide some office space, and then with the office space, some synergistic uses. So that became one of the common themes on all the site plans. Provide a variety of open spaces, not just one size, but small size, intimate, semi-private, public, semi-public. A variety of housing types, anywhere from single family all the way to apartments. A variety of restaurants and sizes. Live entertainment was also popular. And then tucking parking behind buildings and not having big fields of parking. It was clear we want to hide that so that we really are creating more of that walkable neighborhood again. And then every one of them liked the idea of using the parking structures as a buffer to the development so that the walkable neighborhood didn't, between the Highway 17 and 85, you wouldn't have the noise and the traffic, the noise from the traffic, and the buildings would actually buffer some of that inner core. We also, maybe this is one that I could skip over, but we also took a look at the half-mile radius and the number of residences and the Good Samaritan building down here and how we could capture some of that on the North 40 and provide services that would service those. We took those 3 site plans and we massaged them and turned them into one site plan, which started as a bubble diagram. Ultimately, we said, let's take a look at that as a vision plan. Now remember, this is a specific plan, so this isn't supposed to be a development plan. This isn't exactly the way an apartment building or an office building would necessarily be shaped, the footprint. And it goes so far as saying the office wouldn't have to go right here. Maybe the hotel should go right here and the office should go right here. But it gives you an idea of a place to start with visioning of what this could really be. In this plan, I'm going to switch to the next page so I don't forget to say anything. So the yellow represents the residential on the ground floor. Residential is proposed both on the southern portion of the property and on the northern portion, but on the northern portion, it would be proposed above the retail. So there would be residential on both sides, the northern portion above the retail. The office This shows office locating here, a hotel. It shows a mix of different commercial in the center, and it shows a neighborhood retail center the neighborhood retail would act as a transition between the more residential neighborhood and the more commercial. It also shows how those focal points could be implemented. As you drive down the street, instead of running into a parking garage, you're running into an architectural feature. As you drive down this street, you run into some commercial and with outdoor dining or something. So it kind of brought that together. It took the parking garages and pushed one up against the freeway, and then it took the other parking and integrated in what we call this is the wrapped parking, where we have commercial on the ground floor and then residential above it. But the parking structure itself is either underground or inside of that, those buildings. So you don't end up seeing that sore thumb of a big parking lot or the sore thumb of a big parking structure right in the middle of your neighborhood. Probably one of the biggest differences on this site plan from the first site plan is that tried to really open it up and push it back from both Lark Avenue and Los Gatos Boulevard. So we kept hearing really integrate more of the green and the orchard concept. Here we've pushed the buildings back and allowed for a lot more green space along Los Gatos Boulevard, pushed the buildings back and allowed for a lot more green space along Lark Avenue. Another thing that came out of the advisory committee was these buildings, these apartment buildings along Lark need to be broken up into smaller buildings. They're too big at this point, so that's something else that will be incorporated. This shows, if you look, I'm going to go back. This is showing ground floor building footprints. This shows, well, what if you were just looking at second level and above? What happens? And you can see as you would drive down Los Gatos Boulevard, all of a sudden the site plan kind of opens up because many of those buildings along Los Gatos Boulevard would only be one story. So we're suggesting 1 to 2 story structures along Los Gatos Boulevard to help open up the site and not have the big. At one point, we had more of this urban feeling along Los Gatos Boulevard with the taller structures framing the boulevard. Now we've pulled them back and made it open up, really trying to imitate more what you're seeing in the surrounding neighborhoods and having it blend better with the existing neighborhoods. This shows creating a green space along Highway 17 and 85 to really screen any future buildings from 17 and 85. Also creating green space along Lark and Los Gatos Boulevard, creating opportunity for orchard and outdoor dining. This exhibit shows the integration and how important it will be to suggest neighborhood parks, pocket parks, paseos, a variety of different green spaces. On top of, we also want to provide some hardscape spaces. This is showing in the residential neighborhood also need to have a variety of green spaces, a variety of residential types. Again, this is one that we know needs to change now. It needs to be smaller buildings to help blend with what's adjacent to it. And then this is the wrap parking structure that we talked about before. Office and hotel. The neighborhood commercial, creating a prominent spot for that market hall. And then creating an opportunity in the center of the site for a mix of commercial types, small format, medium format, and some somewhat larger format. And then creating a series of small plazas and paseo systems that all connect, so we really are emphasizing that walkable neighborhood. So what we did first was take a look at, so what does that mean? What does that site plan actually represent? And how would it fit under the umbrella that the general plan gives us? So what we're showing now is for commercial, including existing, the total is showing 580,000 square feet. Hotel, 135,000 square feet. The total units proposed is 555. And that's not, we're not proposing any units at this point. We're proposing caps at this point. And the AC may remember, that those of you on the AC may remember that that has continued to go down as we've been meeting with the AC, the number of residential units. So this is probably lower than what the AC saw last. The general plan allows for 750. What we're suggesting now is we think 555 would probably be a more appropriate target. And then open space, we tried to do an open space calculation so we have a better idea of how much open space we're providing as well. And that's 13 acres, which is about 13% of the plan area. I mean, 31% of the plan area, 1331. So we had a series of AC meetings where we talked about land use and a series that we talked about height. So this is some feedback that we got from the AC that we wanted to share with you. Really wanted to focus on land uses that were leaking from Los Gatos and that land uses that will complement the existing downtown. We want to have a mix of uses, the residential, hotel, office, and retail. We wanted to have a mix of residential types. So the AC was suggesting everything from small, single family to single family small lot, all the way up to multifamily and mixed use. Neighborhood serving, commercial was a popular one, and synergistic retail that supports the innovative office and the hotel. And then, of course, the marketplace has always been a popular idea. So how are we going to control land uses in a specific plan if we don't have a site plan and we don't have a development plan in front of you? How are you going to do that in the future? So what we see is a specific land document that's going to have development standards and design guidelines, and it will have a land use plan that will allow for certain land uses, and it will have a land use table that will allow for maximums of certain land uses. So that's the first one is that land use table and providing guidance for maximum square footages. Another option for adding further restriction is requiring a conditional use permit for any single-use retail building over 50,000 square feet. So everything has to go through ARC and site review. But if a developer came and decided they wanted to propose a retail building that was over 50,000 square feet, they would have to come to Planning Commission and Council to get that authorized. So you're protecting the idea that we're trying to balance. The specific plan is supposed to pave the road for that vision for the developer, but we also want to protect the town and make sure that you're having the last say on things that you have a little bit of question on. If you feel, some people felt like that was too small, so we also suggested require conditional use permit for retail buildings over 75,000 square feet. And then we also had some concerns about, what about the small retail? Some people weren't concerned about the larger end at all. They were more concerned about providing too much small retail that would compete with the downtown. So one way to control that would be for small format retail, require a conditional use permit for small retail buildings over a allotted amount on the conceptual land use plan. So we would pick a certain square footage, and after that square footage had been taken up on the land use plan, then they'd have to come back for a specific plan amendment, or they would just come back for a conditional use permit to get additional small retail. So we're going to skip discussion. So then building heights. Building heights, you can imagine, we had a lot of discussion on building heights. And the feedback that we ultimately ended up with, provide view corridors to frame surrounding hills. Even within the site, the AC felt like it was important to provide some corridors, maybe at the main plaza, of hillsides. Provide green and landscape setback around the perimeter. Provide taller buildings internally, and that's something we've heard all the way through the process. Locate those taller buildings central on the site. And remember, the site is actually sloped, so the taller buildings won't be as tall on Los Gatos Boulevard as they would in some areas because it drops off from Los Gatos Boulevard. 1 to 2 story buildings fronting Los Gatos Boulevard. So that would be like 25 to 35 feet. So we wouldn't have tall buildings along Los Gatos. It would be a mix of 1 and 2 stories. And then on Lark Avenue, there would be 2-story buildings with a maximum of 35. So a mix of 25 and 35 foot high buildings along Lark. 2 to 3 story buildings fronting the freeway. And the thought there was have a buffer of green, but then have a setback so the buildings didn't automatically go all the way up to their maximum, but they'd have to have just maybe 3 stories up against the freeway before they stepped up any higher. Office and hotel buildings, we had a lot of discussion about allowing the office and hotel a little bit higher roof height, so 3 to 5 stories. And then discretionary view for any really tall buildings. We also talked about different, not everybody was in agreement with all of these. There were some people who felt like we should allow for taller buildings, some people who felt like we shouldn't have anything, at least one person who wanted something quite a bit lower. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of go through where staff and us as consultants have landed, and then our recommendations, and then have a discussion. So this is showing the ground floor. This is showing if you take away the single-story buildings. And this is showing an idea of allowing just a few key uses to go to a higher height, and allowing them only in the central core of that site. And those uses would be like a apartment building, office, this building that is that mixed-use wrapped parking structure, and then the hotel building. We also asked the designers to put together some visual sims so we could understand what these things would look like. So this is Los Gatos Boulevard and Lark. You can see the existing building here to the left, and you can see what it would look like with 2-story structures at that corner. At one point, they were suggesting taller structures back here to the AC, and now, since then, has been eliminated. It's 2-story structures all the way across. This is internally on the site, standing at that wrapped building and looking out through the most dense part of the development, the highest part of the development, and what would you see? And you could see a framed view of hillsides, wide sidewalks. This is a 4-story apartment building. Would be the taller structure, one of the tallest structures on the site. This is a view from Highway 17, looking back, and what we're looking for is to see, wanting to make sure that nothing would encroach on that view of the hillside or the ridge line. And this is internally, again, taking another look internally. Would we still be able to take snapshots where we could feel, when you're on the site, that surrounding hillsides of Los Gatos? So height recommendations. The first 7 are recommendations that came directly out of the AC. We had pretty good agreement on these first 7. First is to provide view corridors within the site that would frame the surrounding views, not expecting that you would see the hills everywhere, but you could have snapshots that would frame them. Provide green landscape setback at property and perimeter, at the property perimeter. Locate taller buildings internally. 1 to 2 stories along Los Gatos Boulevard, 2 stories along Lark, 2 to 3 stories along the freeway. We went over those, and then 2 to 3 stories internally within the site, which would be 25 to 45 feet within the site, except for the key land uses, the key buildings of office, hotel, the wrapped parking structure, the multifamily buildings right in the center, and a theater. where those could go up to a maximum of 55 feet. Anything over 55 feet would have to not only go through the Arc and Site, which everything would have to go through, but also come back to Planning Commission and Council. So with that, we'd like to get your input and start the discussion.
First hand I saw was Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important to, before I ask the question, to put this in context, because you've heard things like the total units proposed, what we are proposing, we are trying to balance. And I think you need to understand that of the people up here, 2 of us from the town council are on the advisory committee, a minority of the council people, and 3 from the planning commission, again, a minority of the planning commission. So for a lot of these folks up here, they don't hear these things as often as we do. But one of the things I wanted to point out is that when it says total units proposed, what we are proposing, we are trying to balance, those decisions have not been made by the advisory committee. There were discussions about all of these things. And one of the challenges that those of us on the planning or on the advisory committee have had, and it sort of relates to what Ms. McNutt was saying earlier, is what is it exactly that we're doing? Because sometimes we're putting in trees and streets, and sometimes we're not. And sometimes we're looking at view corridors and sometimes we're not. So we actually, at least I shouldn't talk for everybody on the advisory committee. For this one person on the advisory committee, it was not clear what exactly our ultimate product it was supposed to be, because I felt as though there might have been a disconnect between this one person and staff and consultant, which seemed to be going in a much more detailed plan. Whereas I was thinking that we would have a drop-down menu for a potential developer, i.e. Hotel, the ferry building kind of place, which, by the way, everybody always loved every meeting. So just wanted to explain 2 things. One, when you hear things like we propose, we decided, we have this, those were not decisions made by the advisory committee. And there is always a challenge about what exactly is the advisory committee supposed to be doing. And just to give you an example, in our last meeting, we did discuss height. And there was one person on the advisory committee who felt as though nothing should be taller than 35 feet because that was what our town ordinance said. It was pointed out to her that the town ordinance allows 45 feet in downtown. And so from there, 5 people on the advisory committee said, okay, 45 feet maximum. 2 people said, all right, we could consider something above 45 feet. So I just wanted to point out the difference between the definitive presentation and where the advisory committee has been.
Could I respond to that? Thank you for clarifying that. And anytime it said recommendation, that was staff and consultants saying, listening to the advisory committee, this is our recommendation. It was never meant to say this was the advisory committee recommendation, because the advisory committee didn't come to consensus on the 2 main issues that we were coming to you for input on, which was the land use control and the height.
Okay, I think Councilmember Brzezinski was next.
Thank you. I'd like to segue on to Councilwoman Spector's comments as the other member of the council who's on the advisory committee. This is a progress report. This is a work in progress. This is not a conclusion that we're drawing tonight. And I think that's very clear from our discussions on the committee. We have not come to some final point. As a matter of fact, I think that the issue of numbers still remains very significant to all the members of the committee. And from my perspective, I think that it's really important that we take a look at the issues that are not being completely addressed tonight, and it was referenced by Councilwoman McNutt, that we really have gone somewhat more strategic and explicit, and beyond the concept, then perhaps we should by this point. I like the issue of returning to the vision and making sure that the vision now somehow is surfaced and reflected on, because we said at the very beginning that this was not going to be Santana Row South. And in some measures, it does appear, as you're looking at the footprints that are presented us, that in great measure it has that feel. The other issue for us is what of the various uses that are allowed within the general plan, what of those various uses are we actually interested in securing? Because nothing in the general plan says you must do all of the above. And so we're a ways from going to closure on this. I know we've been at this for a very long time, actually from the mid-90s, but at this point in time, we are not going to fast track to closure when I think the committee has not actually completed its tasks. One of the things that I'm discovering tonight is that there have been some changes that have been made by staff and consultants, even since our last committee meeting. I heard tonight that this 4-story parking structure that's in the middle of the project has the potential of being undergrounded in some degree. I heard that word, and I recall last time we talked about that structure at the committee, we were basically told it's going to be above grade. And so there has been evolution. The question of the heights of the multifamily along Los Gatos Boulevard, or Lark Avenue rather, I think that question has also been massaged somewhat, because we're hearing tonight that those structures are too massive. And, underlying all of this is basically the issue of numbers. How many units are we really going to achieve that are to the benefit of the community? What is the square footage that we want to achieve that is to the benefit of the community? How do we really protect our downtown business district? Because looking at limitations on floor planes and allowing some more formula retail may not necessarily, by its nature, serve to achieve what we're attempting to achieve, which is to protect the downtown historic district. So many communities have gone to formula retail perhaps on the outskirts, and lo and behold, it does tend to draw out commercial from the downtown. So I think that it's safe to say tonight in this progress report that we're not there yet. I do want to raise one issue. It's probably down the line yet in terms of what we're discussing, but I know there's a proposal for an environmental review this Thursday evening. And I am very, very concerned about that, because some of the numbers as specified here are reflected in what's going to be evaluated on Thursday night. And you know how it works. We can say all we want that this is a ceiling, not a floor, but once people start to see the numbers, they start to assume that's what the decision is going to be. And I think we may actually be a little precipitous in looking at that initial evaluation, since it is not required. It is recommended to get community input, but I would eventually tonight like us to evaluate that, the wisdom of going to that, when I do think we're still in a great deal of flux.
Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. So 2 or 3 additional comments. My same theme is going to come up again, of course, but and starting with the numbers that Mr. Pazinski just talked about. I'm all about words, and what happens is that when numbers and words start getting out there and used in certain ways, assumptions are made. And I'll use as an example on the chart, on the specific land use table, it references the general, someone's got a cell phone up here too close to a microphone, and that's why it keeps making that strange noise. So it says general plan allowance. Now the word allowance doesn't say maximum, it's allowed. The general plan allows 750. Well, technically, yes, but that was very animated discussion during the general plan update about those numbers, and everyone was reassured, yes, that's the maximum. There's no expectation it would ever approach that. So again, once you start putting out numbers and words like that attached to it, there is an assumption of fear on the part of the community, an expectation on the part of the developer that that could actually happen, when in reality, I don't think it can. I think 555 can't. So, what is a realistic number? I have no idea, because it goes back to not having a really clear vision as what we want this area of Los Gatos to represent. There are assumptions being made as you get into specifics. There is an assumption now that the center will have a 4-story wrapped or sunken parking garage. Well, who says? I mean, once we put that in there, then that's an assumption that that's actually what's going to happen, and any application coming forward would have that in there. That is a very Santana Row type of structure. This is exactly how they're structured in Santana Row with the wrapped parking. Some could say that any kind of 4-story parking garage indicates a density that is too intense for the feel of Los Gatos that we want to have in our vision statement that we don't already have. Another example, at the opening kickoff meeting, and I have the notes here, we talked about needing a performing arts facility, a performing arts theater. That has gotten translated, I believe, it's referred to as a theater on here, but I believe that it's actually a movie cineplex, which, in my opinion, we don't need, since there are 22 within 5 miles of Los Gatos. We talked about needing senior housing. We have housing indicated, but no real definition that how many of those are going to be senior. So I'm back to my same theme of we are missing the vision statement. We are leapfrogging into very specifics that may or may not be appropriate, and I just think we are off the path to a resolution that's going to be productive and work for everyone. I'm done.
Thank you. I'm actually going to jump in here for a moment because I'm going to continue the theme, if you'll pardon the football expression, of piling on for a moment. You made a comment in May that you heard that the site plan was too dense. And to follow on what I think all 3 other council members have said thus far, my recollection of the conversation back about 2.5 years ago as we were going through the general plan was that the numbers we were looking at were just for discussion purposes. They're kind of, I'm not going to put words in anybody else's mouth. I can only speak to my listening of it. But gosh, that would never happen because that's way outside the bounds of what we really want to have out there. And when at every opportunity that this council member has had to speak in the forums about this, I've said it seems too dense. And I've tried to avoid the S word, Santana, but it still feels that way to me, and it still feels too dense to me. And like Councilmember McNutt, I can't throw a number out there because I'm not sure what we're trying to achieve yet. I'm actually glad to hear the 2 members of the advisory committee say that this isn't like a work product from the advisory committee, because I was concerned that we're now talking about a specific proposal. We're talking about some out there idea concept that this, you said it was said in May, I'm going to say it again, this feels too dense. We cannot be all things to all people on this 40 acres. It feels to me like we're trying to take every use that is specified in the general plan as a possibility and put it in here. Small single family, multifamily, office, not incubator, innovation space, small floor plates, or no, pardon me, tenant spaces, large tenant spaces, hotel, entertainment. You've got it all, which is great if you had a brand new town to start. But we're pushing way too much into this for my liking at the moment. And if we're going to go out to a specific plan, I think the specific plan has to articulate, for lack of a better word, the vision of what we're trying to accomplish, and not keep putting out these numbers that are maximums that just seem to get repeated and repeated and repeated until they are fact. And that's what I fear is happening here. Other members? Vice Chair Jensen, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on, as being one of the planning commissioners who's on the advisory committee, follow up on Vice Mayor Spector's comments and also Councilwoman McNutt's. It was a confusing and frustrating process to be on the advisory committee, and I think it might still be. Because as being a person who's been around Los Gatos town planning long enough to have been on the original North 40 planning committee, what we did way back then was sat around a table and were asked for our ideas. It's off, I swear it's off. What we wanted to do. And then that was incorporated into a planning document. And what we've had happen this time is we are presented with specifics that the consultant, the staff, and this may or may not be true, but it seemed to be true, the developer, potential developer, wanted, and we're basically asked to say that was okay. And what's happened in the process, I think, is that the advisory committee has said all along, well, we don't think that's okay. So we get a document tonight where it says, well, the advisory committee said X, Y, and Z about building heights, but the staff and the consultant think they ought to be A, B, and C. So we're still getting a different presentation from the staff and consultant than you're getting from the town advisory committee and the planners. So to me, that's troubling, and that's why we have this disconnect. And I think that's where Councilwoman McNutt's comments come in, is that we haven't started with what we want as Los Gatos. We've started out as, here it is, do this. And if you say, no, I don't want to do that, then we got, okay, but do this. So we still kind of get the same thing, and it's been frustrating. And so hence the confusion, and hence the need for a vision statement that you've heard. So those are my generalized comments. I'm still concerned with, and I wanted to throw in, the distribution of the residences. You say that there's some on the south side, but they're over offices, so families with kids aren't going to live there. And the residences, unless I'm mistaken, I'd love somebody to tell me I'm mistaken, are like 95% concentrated in Los Gatos School District. So the impact on the other school districts is negligible at best. So I think that's a problem. And I think that you heard consistently from the advisory committee that the building heights were too high. So I was disappointed to see a staff recommendation that came in and said, make them higher. And my one last comment was that on your slide about the controls, potential land use controls, it was troubling to me in a couple of ways as a member of the advisory committee. I got the impression that what we were doing was being asked to put our imprimatur on essentially what was going to be a document that allowed development within it, much like a development agreement, not a plan that then the parts of it would come before deciding bodies who had discretion to say yes or no. So when I saw your slide on the land use controls, it just talked about commercial, didn't talk about residential. So I got the impression that maybe there was an idea that things could come in and be developed as a right under whatever plan was going to be approved. And I, for one, would not be in favor of that. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Talasfor.
You've all mostly said what I've been thinking, and with all due respect to the developer and the staff and the people, the volunteers on the advisory committee, all your time and effort, I have to say that when I reviewed the minutes from the past meetings and reviewed the market study and then read the packet tonight, I truly thought that what I was reading about was the development of a mini city right here within our own town. The plan that I see ahead of me, or in front of me, was rather stunning. I didn't expect it. I thought we were still well within the planning phase, but it seems that we are, as Councilwoman McNutt said, operating into a development, but we have no vision for it. I mean, it was lost to me where you were trying to preserve or maintain, enhance the Los Gatos character that we really like to hold on to. I realize this is a new development, and that might be very hard. That's where the conflict comes in. And so we have to look at, well, what is the goal? Perhaps we could not do that. Perhaps we'll never be able to bring Los Gatos character into a whole new development. The only thing that's lacking from this development, as far as I can see, is a school and a hospital, but then that's across this, the street. But it almost appears like another town to me because, as the mayor said, everything's here. So that's my general statement. And I do think that we have to back up and slow down. It takes patience and perseverance to get to that great place that I think we can get to. I have a list of things that I really are making me uncomfortable. The height issue, the height drives the density here, definitely. The idea of having discretionary rulings over height makes me very nervous. I don't know why we're doing that. I think we're way ahead of the game. But that's just a general comment. I might come back with something more specific. There is one specific thing, wait a minute, and that is just about, you asked about the specific planning elements, and the staff, and I think yourself, said that we should go choose the choice of a medium specific planning template, if you will, when I'm hoping that we would have chosen the higher standard one. For a development this large, we would need much more information. This is more than a planned development. This is really, this is developing a, like I said, a small town. So we need to review that a little bit more, or maybe there's a hybrid between the highest standard and the medium, but I'm not satisfied with the medium choice. So,
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I've had doubts for years about what we are doing because my experience, for better or for worse, is towns are very good at listening to what people are telling them they want to do to the property because they've got something concrete in front of them. What we've been trying to do is come up with a plan, and I think the people who have said we don't have a vision yet makes it hard to come up with a plan. We also have just a timing problem. You can come up with the best plan in the world, but if you don't have somebody who wants to do it, or the economy won't support it, you spend a lot of money and a lot of time with a pretty plan, and nothing will ever happen to it, and years will go by, which has already happened to us, and you'll do it all over again. So it's a plan without a developer, or a developer without a plan. So when people say, what do we want there? If we laid down some guide rules, which is to say, for example, in no event will a building be higher than X, that's very helpful. In no event will be there more than Y units, that's very helpful. We want a mix of what I'll call senior housing. That's very helpful. We can do those kinds of things. But when we try to, it isn't clear to me what we're doing in the sense of, I don't know how much we're working with the developer here. So I would hate us to come up with a wonderful gold-plated plan that nobody will touch, and we'll just do it all over again. On the other hand, I don't want to come up with a lead-covered plan that somebody will touch and we'll have to live with. So I think we are not yet at the point where we could lay down some clear, but not as detailed as this. I don't see why people can't say, we're not building buildings taller than X. You work it out. We'd really like to have a hotel there. And if we have a hotel, maybe we can come up with some inducements to have a hotel. We can also talk about where we want things. As I said before, I'm very concerned about the schools, but we have to be sensitive to what the legislature has told us and all that, but we can be. So this is a frustrating conversation that we've had for years, and we're having it again. And listening tonight to what we're all saying, we're really not getting very far. And perhaps if we went back to what Councilwoman McNutt said first, was what do we really want to do there, and just focused on that, then maybe the rest of the stuff comes or doesn't come. But there's no use developing a plan that is of no use to a developer. There's no use developing a plan that is no use to the town. And that's the tension. We're not developers. So I would just like to see us go back to what we can do well, and that's come up with some of these ideas about we don't want height greater than, we don't want density greater than, not the big numbers. Everybody says, oh gosh, I don't want those numbers. That's fine. Let's say that. And you know, what we did on the other side of Lark, we talked about senior housing. You'll recall people wanted to build a lot of units there. And maybe they will, maybe they won't, but they're not going to be general residential units. And there's a reason for that. So I don't know that we're making, well, maybe we're making a lot of progress tonight because we're saying this isn't the way we want to go. That's what I'm hearing, and maybe that's, I don't know if that's what everybody's saying. So.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. In listening to myself talk and in listening to everybody else up here talk, what it's circling back to me is that we have a lot of interest in this room, and they're not necessarily bad interests, and some of them are overlapping and some of them conflict. We may have a developer who is a very fine, reputable developer, and that developer has a certain interest. And then we have town staff who are paying attention to what the town wants and maybe have an ear to what the developer wants. And then the same thing with the consultants. So we have a lot of interests. We have what does the downtown want, a lot of things going on, and the consensus of what you're hearing up here tonight, at least what I'm hearing up here, is that recognizing that we are not yet where we want to be. I agree with Mr. O'Donnell. I don't know how we get there exactly. This is probably not what the potential developer or the consultant or the staff wants to hear, but I think it's very important that it be heard.
Other comments? Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. As I listen to Mr. O'Donnell, it seems to me that maybe we need to go the other way in terms of the specific plan, and instead of moving towards one step up that makes it more detailed, which really does almost imply that we're acting as a developer because it is so specific, we actually go the other way and move to a specific plan that is more general, and more general in reflecting, again, the values and priorities of the community. So that way there would be less implied promise or guarantee that an applicant coming in would have a four-level parking garage in the center, or would be assured of X number of square feet of single family or residential, or and I don't know, but I think we've lost our way in part by trying to be too specific in this specific plan, and that is really the job of an applicant, is to take those general parameters, again, that reflect our values, and propose something. We have a developer who's very much involved in this now, but things happen. I've been through a lot of projects in other areas, and the specific plan stays. Developers come and go, property owners come and go, change over, but the specific plan should be applicable to whoever comes forward at any given point. Now, how we go about determining what that vision is and what we would be comfortable with as a community? I don't know. I wrote down how to set the vision, and then there's an empty piece of paper here. I don't have any good ideas right now. Mr. Erickson might be able to come up with some good ideas, because I know he does this as part of his day job, or others. But I think we need to, as everyone is saying, take a breath, think this thing through, think twice, act once, measure twice, cut once, you know, that kind of thing, and really take the time to do this right.
Commissioner Erickson.
If I can turn the mic on first. So in the materials that the staff provided and the consultants provided, they gave us 3 options for different kinds of plans: a more specific plan and a medium style. In the part of the report about the general level, the most general level of one, I actually don't agree with most of their disadvantages. I would actually argue against most of their disadvantages. So, for example, that it would lead to a greater piecemeal approach. I think if we have a strong vision statement and a strong value statement, that over the long haul, it'll help us have a more coherent approach and less of a piecemeal approach. I'm going to only use a couple of examples in the interest of time. So this argues that there'll be less clarity for developers. I would argue there'll be more clarity for developers if they understand what we intend to do from a clearer vision and so forth. It seems to me what a plan with greater detail in it will translate into more and more numbers and more specificity, so then it becomes much a process which is where the developer checks off that they've met requirements, as opposed to being challenged by the town to kind of, what is our vision, what is this town about, and how do you meet the town's values and what its sense of what it is, as opposed to meeting a series of guidelines and controls. And it seems like to me that it is a trap to try to specify, try to control by specificity, as opposed to inspiring by vision and letting people respond to that and challenging them. I think it's a trap to feel like we can control developers by specificity.
Other questions? Okay. Anything from staff?
Where do I begin? You guys are in a great position right now. You have an opportunity to draft a specific plan. A specific plan is a great tool to guide future development. It's a California tool, and I think it's an advantage to be able to take advantage of something like that, to do some planning on a parcel where the developer owns or controls a portion of it, but the developer, if the developer doesn't control all of it, how does he plan for everything in a comprehensive way? And I think the step that you took to, let's do the specific plan, let's have the town run the specific plan, instead of having, the other option is we could just tell the developer to come in with his plan. He would come in with a specific plan for the properties that he owns, and then everything else you would see as in a piecemeal process as other properties developed. So I think you're on the right road. I think it is the best planning tool that you have. I think it's the best approach. What I have seen is if you do get too specific with a specific plan, the developer that comes in says, well, I can't live with that. I'm going to have a specific plan amendment. And then that developer falls away, and the next developer comes in and says, now I need another specific plan amendment, and they go through the whole process again. So we need to make that balance, and I think maybe that's what the AC has been seeing us try to do. What we'd like to do is come in with a specific plan that captures the vision of the town, that protects the town's values, whether it's height, density, whatever it is, but at the same time isn't so specific that a future developer just is asking for a revision. My experience has also been that what developers want is they just want to know what the town wants. They want to know how high can we go, how many units can we have, so they can decide whether they're going to try it or not. Because to go to that next level of development and to design all those buildings and come back, that is the big expensive step. So to make it so general that there really isn't any teeth in it at all, it's going to be harder to attract a developer than if you come somewhere in the middle. You're in a good spot because we have a developer who's currently interested in the property, so we can bounce ideas to say, is this realistic? And I see it as my goal to try to balance those needs of creating the realistic, specific plan that's buildable, but then balance it with what the town needs. And it sounds like we're not balanced yet. We're not getting what the town really wants. It's still too. But now you can tell that by taking the step back and coming in with a whole new vision plan, we're trying to. And the numbers have gone down. Every AC meeting, the number of residential units has gone down and gone down. The heights have gone down. But I'm hearing that it's not enough. Somewhere along, there's that breaking point where I get told on a regular basis by developers that, all right, if you don't want a parking structure, or wrapped parking structure, then we can do parking lots. And if you're only going to go 2 stories, then we'll do parking lots because the parking structure is not going to make sense for 2 stories of residential. So we end up with a different type of plan. I was hearing so much that we wanted to hide the parking and we didn't, and we wanted to make this a neighborhood. I was thinking parking structures was the direction that we wanted to go so that we could avoid those large expanses of parking lots. And then when we did go through an exercise with the AC where we talked about, well, we can do a commercial center, which is a neighborhood center, where you have your grocery store and your Rite Aid and those type of uses, very low intensity. We could go to we had like a Santana Row type development, and then we had all these different in-betweens, and we came up with that we wanted to go with more of a hybrid, kind of a mix of these uses. Now, it doesn't guarantee that all of those uses would go on the plan. The specific plan would be the framework that would say, you're allowed to do single family in this plan, you're allowed to do multifamily in this plan, and those would be your parameters. You're allowed to go this high, and you're allowed to have this many units. And what we really were hoping to get from the AC and from you ultimately is defining those parameters so that we could go back and try to really take a look at what is realistic with these parameters and what would that look like. Ultimately, the specific plan doesn't have to have the site plan, a concept plan at all. We can just have a land use plan with big bubbles. But what I find is if I present land use plans only, that people start it looks like the whole site is completely built out and there's no green space. So I like to show a vision plan, what I'm calling the concept plan is the vision plan, because the vision plan shows that it's not just all commercial in one area, but there's opportunities for plazas and paseos and sidewalks with outdoor dining spilling on them. So that was the intent of the concept plan, and maybe we need to take a step back and go back to just doing a land use plan, and with a vision statement. That what ultimately would control it in a specific plan would be the land use plan. We would do a land use plan. Many specific plans have a vision plan up front that would say this vision plan is just conceptual only, but you get an idea of how things could fit together. But what controls it would be the land use plan, the land use table, the development standards that set the maximum heights and that set the densities or the setbacks. So I think we're kind of in between of, we have the benefit of a developer, so maybe we've shown too much specificity, but we also have the benefit of doing the specific plan, which is really intended to be the long-term, long-range visioning document, not the development plan. Do you want to add something to that?
Thank you. I think that we did get some really good information tonight. It may not seem that we did, but I do believe that we did. I think that our process has morphed somewhat. I think that, as Councilmember McNutt said, you typically start with a vision statement and go from there. And we tried to start that way. If you remember back on our early sessions we had, it was really visioning and brainstorming. What we found working with the committee was that it was difficult at times to really understand what a market hall might be, or to understand what a mixed-use building may look like. And so we, as planners, defaulted to, well, let's give them some education. And as that education builds, it becomes, to be able to have everyone understand that things become more specific. And I think that's the direction we went in. We're hearing clearly, and I heard a consensus of everyone that spoke, that we need to start with that vision. And I think we've got a lot of input that we can easily then work with the advisory committee on creating that vision statement. I have no doubt with that. We have more information than we probably need. So I'm very comfortable with that. As Debbie was saying, we were hoping to get a little more specific information from the council and the planning commission on things such as building heights and uses. I think we got a little bit of that. I don't believe by far we got anywhere close to a consensus on that, however. I did want to answer the one question that Councilmember Przinski raised, and that was on the environmental impact report process of having the scoping meeting this Thursday. As he stated correctly so, that scoping is not necessary. However, the town is always into a very transparent process, and to be able to have as much input on any process that we engage upon. And so we felt it was important to go ahead and hold the scoping session. And that really is just an opportunity for community members, public agencies, any agencies that would have some type of relationship with the plan, whether it be Caltrans or City of San Jose or San Jose Water District, to be able to submit comments to us, or actually be able to come to the scoping session and give us comments and say, in the EIR, we want you to study X. And that's the intent of the scoping meeting. So it's nothing more than helping us understand what the community wants to look at. The project description's pretty broad because we want to make sure that we captured everything from, let's hypothetically say the plan ends up with, I'm just going to pull a number out of the air, 300 residential units and 450,000 square feet of commercial. We want to cover everything from that to the general plan maximum, but we came down, as you can see in the description on the notice of preparation. What that does for us, for the town, is we get to analyze all the impacts of those scenarios, and then that's more information for the advisory committee and ultimately planning commission and council in which to inform what that ultimate vision is. So the more information you hear, if you hear that X causes this, you may say, we're not interested in that, let's go to Y. And that's the intent of getting that process going. It's just being able to accumulate more data to help inform decisions. I hope that answers that question.
Councilmember Przinski.
I understand what the purpose of the meeting is, but on page 3, when you talk about land use and study parameters, now you see the actual numbers, residential up to 555 units, which is considered a reduction from what the general plan ceiling was. Retail, food, and entertainment, 340,000 to 420,000 square feet. Just in that regard, if I were reading that, then I would assume, as a member of our community, that it's going to be at least 340,000. Office, 100,000 to 162,000. Again, my assumption is once you're presenting a floor, it sounds like that's the minimum, and 125 to 150 hotel rooms. Again, the concept is, how does this communicate to our community, and how do we respond to this? I remember at one of the meetings we had, Councilwoman Spector asked the question, why do we have a minimum? Why isn't the minimum 0? And when you calculate from what do we really want to achieve, then you really do need to have a 0 sum. It doesn't mean this is going to work for a developer by any means. That's not what we're talking about. But in terms of putting out this at this moment in time when you've heard the input from the decision-making bodies. I think this is precipitous, and it's not the time to do it. We may end up with these exact same numbers, but we have to go and start to return to the initial vision, and that vision then would be used to evaluate whether these numbers are ballpark at all. So I understand where you're going. I just think that the message is unfortunately unclear when it comes to what are we trying to say to the community who want to give input to this and are very concerned about what we're going to do with the North 40, because that is, for all intents and purposes, our last and best site to do it right. And we have said so many times that that we are going to make that a priority.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said, and I think the reason why you don't see a range of 0 to, let's say, 500 is that you want to study the impacts. And you're not going to see impacts at lower ranges. You need to be able to see what's the greatest impact and where do we want to go from there. So you always really want. I don't like using the term worst case scenario, but I'll use that because that's the term you look at in an impact analysis, because you are looking at the greatest potential impacts. And what you're able then to do, the decision makers then will say, this is the impact. This isn't where our value system is. We want to be somewhere here. So without that data, though, you can't make those kinds of decisions. And obviously, when you're looking at on the lower side, you're not going to have impacts that you can then weigh. You really need to get something that you can weigh. And so that's why you tend to, just like we did in the general plan EIR, as we noted, we never anticipated 750,000 square feet, 750 residential units and 580,000 square feet. We anticipated that would be a ceiling, but we needed to study something. We needed to study what the impacts of that scenario was. And that's what we're trying to do with the EIR. Again, accumulate more data to give to the advisory committee, to give to the planning commission and the town council to make those decisions, and also to help staff with crafting those alternatives.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
It's interesting that we spent a lot of time talking about our frustrations and what our problems were. For example, Commissioner Erickson talked about the disagreeing with the disadvantages proffered here, and then when we were all through, well over an hour, the consultant, and I respect what the consultant says, showed to me a disconnect. Listened to everything we said and kind of said, well, that's interesting. Now let's go back and do it the right way. The problem is, whether it's the right way or the wrong way, nothing's going to get through unless the council approves it. And I'm not cheered by the thought that people are going to go off and do some work when this disconnect, that's what I heard anyway, when the consultant was talking. It's not a question of right or wrong. The consultant could be 100% wrong, right, and we could be 100% wrong, but that's, it's the 100% wrong people get to make the decision if that were the case. And it's not, I don't think. So I wouldn't rush off and do a lot of work if the people who are doing the work don't understand what we're saying. Because I think we've said, we don't like what's going on. Don't do it that way. And the response was, yeah, but we're going to do it that way. So I'm very concerned about that. And as far as the EIR concerns, I have no comment on the scoping except to say, based on what I heard tonight, you can go out and spend a lot of money and you can scope and you can do all kinds of things, but if you don't know what you're going to do, it does seem premature. And if you look at the history of the North 40, awful lot of money has been spent for little return by the town. And so I would ask the mayor and the council to really kind of check to see where staff's, and maybe this consultant, what they're going to do between now and whatever the next date is, because I did not hear a connection. I did not hear the staff saying, we know what you're saying. I heard the staff saying, you're wrong. And that's not going to get anywhere. So anyway, that's my perception. And when I say staff, I'm not talking about Wendy, because Wendy was saying, I understand, and you're all right, and all that. But the people who I guess are doing the work, I don't think understand that whether we're right or wrong. Somebody better educate the council if they're wrong, because as long as they believe what they do, and I happen to agree with the council, whatever they're doing is not going to get approved. So that's what I want to say.
Chair Sayoc.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I wanted to take a step back and listen to all of the feedback that we've gotten. Since I'm one of the 3 commissioners also on the advisory committee, it's good to hear what others' perspectives are, since we get to share this on a regular basis with the staff and with the consultants. What I would like to provide, though, is another way to look at the process. We've talked about the way the town usually responds to projects. We get a project and we respond to it. We do an environmental study, and because there's a set project, that study looks at how do we mitigate the problems associated with this project. I think we have an opportunity now, which we all recognize. We have raw land that we can do with our vision. And that's where we get stuck at. What exactly is that vision? And over the past year, through all the meetings, this bucket list of what would be nice if we could put on there has just grown. That doesn't mean that, as Mr. Mayor said, everything has to go on there. In fact, at the last meeting, one of the questions I had asked, again on vision, the 99 specific plan had no residential, and the Los Gatos Boulevard plan had no residential in the North 40. So what happened between 99 and the last general plan update? What happened so that residential, not only some residential, but 750 units got put on there? What was the great vision that changed that vision? And so that's something that I'd like to hear. And at the time at the advisory committee meeting, no one was able to answer that. Excuse me. But what we do have, again, besides raw land, is we've had several studies done already because we've had a general plan update and we had an EIR done. So we have significant money spent on studies that we can use to gather information that we have in-house. We know where our problems are: traffic, air, overcrowding of schools, and that falls along social services. And so instead of taking this ceiling and trying to just chip away, 750 to 550 to 350, whatever, it seems we should go the opposite way and say, okay, traffic, for example, we're at level system, I think it's F, D, D. Okay, how many more cars can we realistically put on our streets to keep it at D, or if we want to improve it to a C? We have those studies now, and that could tell us how many cars realistically we can put on this development, how many cars that translate into residential versus commercial. Let's see what other. I made a whole list. Air quality. We know that because of Bay Area Air Quality Management District guidelines, excuse me, I'm talking too much, residential cannot be located adjacent to freeways. So we know exactly where those are going to have to be located. We know overcrowding. We know we don't want it all limited to the south. Thank you. Because of overcrowding of schools. So, but that has never shifted from the April to now. It's still clumped in the south, and we've heard that there's going to be inequity in distribution to the schools. Again, that doesn't have to happen. We don't have to have 550 units. And so, in terms of scoping for Thursday, I don't know if we have to have it because it may already be planned, advertised, but there are studies that we can use, and I feel like we should just take a step back, see what exactly we have, and then go out and see what else we need to do. Because really, with this opportunity, we should do the studies first, plan what the best numbers are, instead of going from this random maximum ceiling and then start chipping away, okay, this is okay with us. So that's my comments. Thank you, Charles.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question and then a comment. The question is on the scoping, the EIR, the scoping meeting on Thursday. Let's say, for example, On one end, you have potential for 750 units, and on the other end, you have 350 units. And I understand that the scoping wants to put something on the table so there is something to study. But does that mean, does that limit what the town could ultimately do? For example, could the town put 20 units, even though that this is what the study has been?
Town has full discretion. This is just simply a document that provides additional information. The results of an EIR are simply just providing additional information for the decision makers. It does not limit or obligate the council in any way, shape, or form. It would limit the council from it wouldn't limit the council. The council, if there were impacts that couldn't be mitigated, the council would have to adopt a statement of overriding consideration if they want to approve it. But it doesn't limit the council from denying, lessening. It doesn't set the council in any way, shape, or form.
And Wendy, to clarify, it does limit, you can't go above and beyond, because that would not have been studied.
Yes, you have to
It does
have the
not
study
limit down.
parameters. Exactly.
And then the next thing is actually a comment following up with Mr. O'Donnell. After we made our statements up here at the dais, I actually also heard a disconnect from what we said and what was said in the audience by the consultant.
Okay, seeing no other hands. Commissioner Talis-For.
Yeah, I have some questions, and that is with the EIR. Is it a matter, and I don't know who could answer this, is it a matter, I'm hearing from the people up here, several of you, that perhaps it's, why are we going ahead with it? Now, I understand staff wants to go ahead with it because it would provide some information, but I'm wondering, would it be better for us to perhaps wait when we have some information we want? I mean, can we put this off? Are we contracted at this point that we can't put it off, or could we push it back?
Well, we've advertised it. I think it's really would not be fair to the public and public agencies if we were not to hold it. We can hold the scoping and get the information. It doesn't mean we have to do anything at that point. We can hold on to that information until such time the decision makers are ready to move forward with a project, and then we can continue in that. But I think it's valuable to get information from from the public, and as long as I think Councilmember Spector's comments are very important, and it needs to be continually messaged to the community that this is not a project. This is simply getting information. It's setting some parameters so it can be studied.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess my last question is, what would be our next steps? And who
Well,
would
next step's
answer
going to be
that?
public comment, but
We
Mr. Manager?
have next steps identified. I don't think they're appropriate, however. I think the staff and consultants need to.
Yeah, in lieu of what you've heard tonight.
Yeah, I think we need to
and
go
this
back to the
discussion,
drawing board.
What are the next steps,
Yeah.
and who do I address that to?
So we would be happy to hear your input, but at this point in time, I don't think it's appropriate for us to lay out next steps because I just don't know what those are right now.
Mr. Manager?
Yes, thank you. I just want to follow up with what Wendy has said, and that the feedback has been clear and it's been consistent from everybody who spoke. Staff did hear that. I believe our consultant did hear it. And we will deal with any disconnects that exist, but clearly the need to focus on a vision and to step back to the vision discussion first. I think we heard from repeated people, and I heard both Wendy and the consultant say that will be our next step, is to focus on that discussion question. I think staff needs to reconvene tomorrow to determine what's the best use for the scoping session, if any, on Monday or Thursday night, given it has already been advertised and noticed, and to rescind that. There will no doubt be people that show up that didn't get a rescission, but it's what is the most effective way to use that, given the discussion that the Planning Commission and Council had tonight. So I think the next steps, to answer your Commissioner's question and the Council's concerns, aren't what was in the slide that we presented before, but for staff to work with our consultant and other resources to look at how do we come back and address the vision question, which has been a challenging one. In all the discussions to date, there has not been a consensus on a vision for the North 40. With one exception, I have never heard anybody say, here's my vision for the North 40. And it's, I think that is the toughest question, and what staff and the consultants have been doing in a more traditional land use perspective, which really gives up the strength of the specific plan that we're in control, is we've been throwing out ideas to try to get to that consensus of what is it the decision makers, and then take it out to the community that the community wants. We've heard this group clearly provide the direction. That's not the path we want to go. We will recalibrate and try to find a way to start with that vision. I don't think that's going to be any easier. We've spent 15, 20 years trying to get to that point since the early specific plans that Commissioner Jensen and others have worked on. And the original specific plan didn't include any residential. The council directed that it be updated to include residential back in, I believe, 1998. That then was held off till the next general plan update. So that vision for the North 40 is the tough issue, and we've heard all of you direct that's the next discussion we need to have, and we're not going to get it from a granular project description. And that's what I think we've heard.
Okay, I'm going to move to public comment. Do we have any cards over there yet? And if you wish to speak to this issue, please fill out a card and turn it into the clerk to my left, your right. And we're going to start with Tim Boyd. He left. Okay. Made that one easy. I don't know if I said, but you'll have 3 minutes. Up to. Matt Hudis. Should have said that before you went back to your seat. Sorry.
First, I'd like to disclose that I've been part of the advisory committee since the summer. So I've seen part of this, midway through the process. And hearing the reaction today, I have to say that I understand that it seems like a daunting problem. In my professional experience, I've seen a lot of very tough problems, maybe tougher ones, faced up to. So I think it's something that we can address. In support of the comments that have been made about the need for a vision, I'd like to offer a few suggestions about some elements of the vision that I think would be helpful. Getting agreement on the conceptual design before proceeding into the detailed or specific design, including a definition of the communities that are being served by this development, a definition of the needs of those communities and the elements that will serve those needs, and most importantly, for all three of those, a prioritization, potentially with some ranges, numeric ranges, for those things that will essentially show what's the balance of these elements that are in this plan. So I think some of these elements have been covered in the consultant's report. I think what we need to see going forward is a summary of those elements and an explicit decision point or agreement before proceeding into the more specific or detailed work. I think once that agreement is achieved on the vision that includes agreement on those elements, then I think there's some things that should be included going forward. One of them is what I call an economic balance analysis. That is, not only looking at the potential for new business in the North 40, but also looking at the negative impact of business there, potential negative impact in other parts of the town. The other thing is, I think we could look at some relevant comparisons, places where other communities where an established business district has had an adjacent new business district built near it and how the impact has, and potentially looking at the impact of Santana Row on the downtown in the past as one of these examples. So thanks. I just encourage that some of these be included going forward.
Thank you. Don, I always say this wrong, Capabrez?
Good evening. Don Capobres with Grosvenor, and he's probably waiting for the developer to come up and just complain, which I'm not going to do. There's a couple things. Obviously, I think we're all frustrated in the room today just because of how much time has been spent and kind of where we're at and the disconnect. We're still here, first of all. You're scaring us a little bit, but we're still here. But, you know, this was a process, I think, a decision that was made a long time ago about what to do on the North 40 before we even met any of you or any of you in the crowd. Grosvenor, as a company, decided, let's go with a community process that's all-encompassing. Let's try to work. We have a window of opportunity in the general plan to try to work with a community and a town to try to get some guiding principles together instead of, and then knowing that a specific plan was going to be required. When you look at that from where we started, which is, believe it or not, 4 years ago, it looks impossible from a timing perspective, and almost who's going to do that? I'm lucky to represent a company that has a long-term vision on things, that believed in the sales pitch that we made collectively in San Francisco. It said, this is the right thing to do. It's systematic. It's going to take a long time, but it'll be better at the end. I'm not here to complain, but I do wonder sometimes, especially tonight, whether or not an application 4 years ago would have been the more appropriate thing to do. We might have gotten quicker feedback. I'm not saying, and I'm not here to say anything other than we're part of the process, and we're not hiding behind a curtain anymore. We've clearly, over the course of time, learned a hard lesson that this is your plan. We're just merely looking at whether or not our what we do as a business fits into your vision, and that's where this whole discussion is really appropriate. You need to get us a vision. I'm not saying you need to get us a vision, but we're really searching for some guidance here. We do have some decisions that need to be made on a timely basis. Again, I'm not threatening anybody here, but sooner or later the chariot turns into a pumpkin for us, and I'd hate for that to happen. So we'll keep plugging along. We're very happy working with your staff. We're very happy working with you. We've all had very good discussions, and I've made, which always happens on these projects, you make friends that'll probably be here longer than any of just friends we made have been really good. So we need some help. We need some direction on this. We're willing to do what you need us to do, but anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Before we go on to further public comment, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break. Okay, we're going to continue with public comment after the manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was speaking on the fly up here and did want a chance to consult with staff on that. We were looking at a couple of different options for what to do with Thursday night scoping meeting, given it's already been kind of publicly addressed and advertised. We think we're missing an opportunity if we don't make a decision tonight to use what may be our best vehicle to inform those who are planning to come whether or not they should come Thursday night. So if the council and the planning commission concur, we actually think tonight would be the best opportunity to rescind and cancel the Thursday night scoping session to then come back and do a separate visioning process with the council and then the planning commission. I don't make this recommendation lightly, but we are making it quickly because this is our best opportunity to communicate with the public. We did explore quickly some other options for Thursday night, such as involving any public that show up in a visioning process, such as having any public that show up throw out the information that they would like considered in the studies that would typically be done as part of an environmental review process. We think those could be valuable exercises. I'm just not sure how well we could pull them together in a day and a half for an unknown audience that's coming. So I think that leads me to the reluctant discussion that I'd hate to miss this opportunity to tell those who may be watching on TV or in the audience that we're going to cancel the scoping meeting pending further direction and discussion with council.
Did you have a comment, Councilmember Brzezinski?
Well, I would recommend that we move with the manager's recommendation. I think that it is appropriate. I think that given the fact we have a viewing audience and members of the community who are here who probably are the most concerned, that if we did choose to rescind that meeting, I don't think it's necessary to create another session, but I do think that it's appropriate at this time to move away from that initial decision.
Do we need a motion for that, or is that just council direction?
I don't think so. I think it's really a managerial decision, but I wouldn't make it given the comments the commission and council have made without informing you. I do think we have asked a number of other agencies to provide written comments. We'll obviously accept any written comments and make those part of the record. Those could inform studies that are then subsequently done with whatever emerges from the North 40 specific planning process.
Okay. Is there any other comment from council? I think we're going to go with your recommendation.
And as well as public comments from the public, obviously in writing, be it email or letter. Anybody who provides written comment in response to the scoping notice just becomes additional information to inform the council, planning commissions, and staff's deliberations.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to continue with public comment. Next is Jack Van Atta.
Thank you. I'm Jack Van Atta from Los Gatos Community Alliance, and some of you may recall me from all the way back at Ditto's Lane. That's how I got into coming to these meetings and quickly got over my head. In looking at Ditto's Lane as a beginning for me, what we recognized was that there was a lot of stuff going on in town, and we partially the Ditto's Lane people, but then we started picking up people from other areas. But we became concerned with the totals on all the projects. And if you went to our website online, which is lg-ca.com, we put totals down there. Most of these totals came from the reports that we got from the city. Some we disagreed with. We disagreed with the traffic count at Albright. We disagreed with the traffic count at Bluebird. But they're close. They're not that far off. And when you consider the numbers, they're pretty large. And we just want you to remain aware of the numbers that we believe are fairly close to accurate. And again, these numbers are Albright fully developed out at 550,000 square feet, not the 250,000 plus, I think, 168 senior units that are currently approved, but I don't believe there's a lease signed at this point. So we left the numbers as they are. Even Ditto's Lane is still on here because the town owns the property. Something will probably develop there. We showed a total of 406 students coming to the schools, which is well over half the size of either Van Meter or Blossom Hill. And on the daily car trips, and it's important everybody understands, these are new daily car trips, we're seeing 38,689 daily car trips. And of those, and again, this is before we heard the information tonight on North 40, 21,000 of those were coming from North 40, and a lot of those will still be there because all you're doing is reducing 200 units of residential. It looks like the commercial is staying about the same size. 5,000 were coming from Albright, and probably around another 300 were coming from the sports park. So Lark Avenue is going to be jammed. We also think anybody that is traveling north on 17, north or south on 85 is going to be impacted. I would like to commute to Santa Cruz if I was still working regular commute hours. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Lee Quintana.
Hi, I just want to Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I've attended all of the advisory committee and community meetings and the joint sessions between the council and the commission. And I came away from all the advisory meetings with a sense of frustration on everybody's part. The audience that was there, the committee itself, the developer. It was a very frustrating experience. And I think you've all sort of hit it on the nose by saying that we put the cart before the horse. The vision statement really needs to be made first so that you can start looking at how the pieces fit the vision statement. Secondly, I'd like to say that I agree with Mariko that even if you're not going to do the whole EIR now because you really don't have a defined enough project, it's important to get all of those background studies that you can get of the existing conditions because they may suggest additional studies, like I think has been mentioned. And also, they may give you a clue as to what the site can actually handle. Secondly, on the EIR, I would like to suggest that because this project is as big as it is, rather than just when you do the actual EIR, rather than just doing it on one specific scenario, that you have several instead of just that are analyzed at the same level so that you know what the impacts are and you can have some comparisons rather than doing it in the, I guess they call it the CEQA, an alternative section where they're very sketchy and they're really not in detail. I have lots more to say, but I think those are the important things. And there are, within those initial studies of the existing settings, a lot of information that is really valuable. The traffic, you can't do the specific analysis, but you can do the numbers. The greenhouse gas and several other things. Remembering that our general plan EIR has already stated that we have significant traffic and greenhouse gas and air quality impacts from the general plan.
Thank you. Diana Abadi.
So good evening, members of the council and commissioners. I'm just trying to make a joke of this because it's been a long day for me. First day back after a 2-week holiday, and I will tell you that the community's been very happy that we actually were aligned with the high school. So I wanted to share that with you so that everyone's feeling very relaxed. So as far as my community, we're all pretty relaxed today. But I just wanted to share a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to just let you know what the school district is doing, and I wanted to thank the town because I have been working with the town and I've met with the town since I've been here. This is my 6-month anniversary, and I've really kind of maybe should have been rethinking this after how much work I've been doing in the last 6 months. But I've met with the town, I've met with the mayor. And I also wanted to say that I met with Don Caprose, I'm sorry, Don, several times. And I appreciate everyone's consideration for the school, and I know that I've inherited some issues here as the new superintendent. But I wanted to tell you what we're doing, and I wanted the town to know what we're doing. So we have a campaign called Imagine LGUSD 2022, which is our long-term facilities master plan, and we are going right into the process right now with the request for proposal. And I've invited members of the town to join us, and we will be doing a new demographic study. We hope to actually start this work sometime at the end of February and have all of this done by August. So we'll have that information, and we hope to do this with the town so that we can share those numbers with that. I will say, and for the record, that the demographic studies really need to be looked at across the district because we just had 25 new students enroll as of December 22nd. And what we're seeing is just an influx in the economy with what people are coming from out of the country. So we have something that we really want to consider, and I would like the town and everyone else to think about that, is the transient housing that's created with interim housing with apartments, because we get short-term rentals coming in, and what those apartments do to us right now is generated 25 more students within the district. That is across 5 schools. So we are spreading them across the 5 schools, but that has just been since December 19th. So, and I approved them all this morning. So most of those kids are starting school tomorrow or the day after. So that's something new that I don't think anyone and former superintendents thought about, what interim housing does to us, not just long-term housing. So. And out of respect for everyone else, I know that no one here has set a vision, but my vision would be to continue the community feel. And if I had my way, I'd love to see a new school. And I'm not asking the town to build it, I'm not asking the developers to build it, but to work in partnership with us, because our schools are our elementary schools are over 600, our middle school has 1,100, and I come from school districts that offer a lot more in small community type schools. So that would be my vision, just putting that out there. Never been shy about saying what I wanted. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry Arzi.
Well, I think I get to wind this up. I just want to make a couple of comments on the protecting the CBD, Central Business District. The comments made by our staff, I think, are unworkable. They've been talked about many times before, and I certainly hope we didn't pay anybody for those comments. The developer has already said he wants small business in his center, and he welcomes our downtown shops to rent there. This came from the Los Gatos Community Association meeting that the developer, Mr. Caprobes, made a presentation to us. He refuses to limit store sizes at less than 25 square feet, 2,500 square feet. So the suggestion by the the consultant is mute. This shopping center is a perfect place for outdoor events. So to tell him he can't do farmers markets or music or outdoor events is ridiculous. I mean, he has to do that. This is part of a package that will be part of what is going to go on, whether he presents it or whoever owns it later will present it. You know, at the Los Gatos Community Association, the developer said he would consider senior housing. And God, that was months ago. And we're just now talking about senior housing. He said he would develop it if you said you wanted it. So it's not very difficult to say you want it. Regarding, also at that meeting, the developer presented his apartment complex, and I hate to kick people when they're down, but I mentioned to the architect that they were being led down the primrose path, as this community would never allow a project of this size. So this project has been staff-driven. You people have allowed it. So you need to take the responsibility and get moving very fast. Regarding the vision statement is not a statement by itself for the North 40. The North 40 is not a community. We don't need a vision statement for the North 40. We need a vision statement for the boulevard, which is a continuation of the North 40. They are contiguous, and they must be one and the same vision statement. Thank you.
Thank you. And Andy Wu?
Mr. Mayor, member of the Commission and Council. Mr. Arzi doesn't get the last word this evening. I was the host and moderator at that Los Gatos Community Alliance forum in which Mr. Don Caprobes was our speaker. And I understand that Mr. Arzi is the president of the Downtown Merchants Association, so I'm not going to take any sides. I can just say this. I recently stumbled across a show on History Channel called Pawnbrokers. And it was a very interesting show, which I think members of this council and the Planning Commission can take something away of, to the extent that you don't violate the Brown Act. In that show, there's a willing buyer and a willing seller, and they try to make a deal in the back room before the product is put to auction. I think you all need to do that. Go into the back room and speak with the developer as to what the developer will take. Because my understanding from that public forum is Grosvenor has a bottom line in mind at which something will not pencil out for them, and they will walk away from this project. So instead of spending another year or 2 or 3 years in trying to form a vision that will never come to fruition, and I love Commissioner O'Donnell's comment about gold plating and lead lining, because you have a gold plate and a lot of lead, but nobody knows how to apply and amalgamate the two. I think that's called alchemy or something like that, right? But instead of spending another 3 or 4 years and countless hours of town staff in developing something that is never going to work from the town's perspective and may never work from the developer's perspective, I think you need to have a hard heart and then come back and you can give us something that is a vision that the two of you have sat down to come up to create. That's all the comment I have.
Thank you. I have no other cards. I don't see anybody rushing to the podium. Mr. Manager, anything else?
The town attorney has advised that I be declarative in my statement that we are canceling the optional scoping meeting for Monday night or Thursday night. We will have a staff person present for any members of the public that show up out of courtesy so they don't face a locked door. We would, as with any secret process, encourage and invite written commentaries from members of the public or other agencies regarding any studies or issues that should be considered. We will follow up on some of the discussion about what is the additional information that would be helpful in crafting a vision and ultimately a specific plan for Planning Commission and Council approval.
Okay. Vice Mayor Spector.
And the meeting you're talking about is the one for this Thursday,
This
January
Thursday
12th,
at 6 p.m.
2012?
Over at the, oh no, it's here in the council chambers,
All right, and at what time was that meeting?
6 p.m.
The one at 6 p.m. this Thursday, the 12th.
Thank you.
I knew you were talking about that. Thank you.
Okay, looking to my left and to my right, seeing nothing else, this study session is adjourned. Okay, I'm going to call to order a special meeting of the Town Council Joint Parking Authority Redevelopment Agency. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here?
Councilmember Joe Brzezinski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Steve Rice.
Here. We're going to roll right into verbal communications. If anybody would like to speak for up to 3 minutes on any item not on tonight's council agenda, you may rush to the microphone and seize it for up to 3 minutes. Seeing none. Next is the consent calendar. I'll be looking for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent calendar is approved. Other business. Consider the election to serve as successor agency and successor housing agency for dissolving redevelopment agency and adoption of a resolution authorizing the election. Staff report, town manager.
The town attorney and I are able to respond to any questions the council or public has. Given the length of the prior meeting and the lateness of the hour, we're not planning a staff report, except with the comment that this has been put before you because the Supreme Court decision requires action by January 13th or we lose the option.
My kind of staff report. Questions for staff? Seeing none. I'm open to a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. Thank you. It's not in my notes. I don't. Public comment. Ms. Quintana.
My only question is, I think, one that a lot of people in the community have, and I don't know whether it's something that you have the information on or not, but I'm sure there are lots of people who would like to know how this is going to affect specifically the Dittos Lane.
Staff like to take that one?
Successor housing. To the extent we can't discuss any potential or prospective development applications for Dittos Lane, what we can say, as referenced in the staff report, is that without the town being the successor housing agency, the assets of Dittos Lane and other current redevelopment agency-owned properties would pass to either the County Housing Authority or the State Department of Housing and Community Development. So by being the successor housing authority agency, we retain control and ownership of those properties.
Thank you very much. Any questions of Ms. Quintana? Seeing none. Any other public comment? Seeing none. Now I'll open it up for council questions or a motion.
I'll do a
Councilmember
motion.
Brzezinski.
I'd like to move to adopt the resolution authorizing and electing Town of Los Gatos to serve as successor agency and successor housing agency for the dissolved Los Gatos Redevelopment Agency.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. There being no other items on tonight's council agenda, we are adjourned.